What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Final Cut Pro Help Live. My name is Jared Ewing, and this is the show I'm sure all of you have been waiting for. It is the final episode of Final Cut Pro Help Live for the 2019 Shortcut of the Year. I'm super excited about this because we've been collecting votes over the past month. If you've been following on Instagram and all the social medias, I'm sure you've seen the various quizzes on there and questions being asked, whether it be Twitter and all those fun things, gathering all of this information, trying to find which shortcuts you think should be crowned the 2019 Shortcut of the Year. Unfortunately, only one can actually get that title, and there's still, let me check, there is still a few minutes left in the voting, so if you haven't yet voted, go over to Instagram, search for @FinalCutProHelp, and use this story. You'll see them on there, and you can go ahead and vote right on there. Once we have all the votes in, I will announce here which one we have. I don't think it's going to get swung one way or another. I think it's already pretty final there unless we get a whole rush of votes in, but we'll see if that changes. So I did want to summarize a few of the kind of what's happened so far. So I'm going to jump right on in here to Final Cut Pro. Let's do Command 0 to go back to the default interface. I'm going to switch over to my demo library that I have here, and we'll take a look at a couple things, because I did want to at least pay tribute to the top 4 shortcuts that did make it up here, and the couple that didn't make it onto the next round. I did want to show you them, give some demos, some call-outs, and that way they at least get here into that final round. All right, so let's do this. The first shortcut I wanted to show off was the one that's finishing 4th. And if you're on the Instagram stories, you saw this. And it's just the letter B to enable the razor blade tool. So if you're used to Final Cut, you've probably used this tool. Inside of the tools menu here, you have your select tool, A, which made it up pretty high. You have B, which is the actual razor blade tool. And this one activates that tool and so that you can cut things. So when you're on your timeline here, let me increase the size of these clips. Just hit the letter B for blade. It enables the razor blade tool, and you can just click anywhere on the timeline, and it goes through and makes an edit or a cut of whatever clip is there, whether it be a music track. In this case, it was the screen recording, any of those. So let me open up another project here that has a couple clips on here. And same thing, if I want to go through and cut these, I can just click. Because I have the blade activated, it just cuts those 2 clips. I can then hit the A key on the keyboard to switch back to the arrow tool, the select tool, select a clip, hit delete, and it deletes that portion. A couple other things about this blade tool. If you just press the letter B down and hold the letter B, so I'm not letting go of that key, you can actually go through and make your cuts. So I can click on the clip a couple times, and then when I let go of the letter B, it switches back to the previous tool, which in this case was the select tool, just the arrow tool. Same thing, if I'm on, let's say I'm on the zoom tool, I'll just hold the letter B, switches to the blade tool, I can make some cuts, and when I let go, it switches back to that zoom tool. So that works with any of these tools, but if you're using the B key, which is a favorite by many of you, that's a way you can use that shortcut a little bit more than just activating the tool, using it, and then being done with it. So that's the blade tool. One other, I guess, tip that's in there if you don't know this, you might have multiple layers stacked on top of each other. So let me put a couple of these layers on top of each other. So now I have 3 video layers here. If I hit the B key and I were to click on this top clip, it's just going to cut that clip into 2, right? I'm going to do Command Z to undo that. But if I hold down the Shift key, I'm going to go over here in the empty space. Notice how there's 2 razor blades now on the icon there, right? So Shift and clicking with the blade tool is actually blade all. So in one click, you can cut every single layer of or clip there. It doesn't have to just be video layers. It can also be audio layers all at once. Then we can switch back to our select tool using the A key, and I can click and drag and select all of these. I do this very frequently when I just want to trim the end or the beginning of a whole layer of clips all off at once. So again, that's pressing the B key to activate the razor blade tool, and then holding Shift on the keyboard to deactivate blade all. So that was the shortcut that finished 4th place in Shortcut of the Year here, is just the letter B. And now let's go to the third place shortcut, because I have used this one already a couple times in this demo here. So Command Z, which is the same thing as going up to the edit menu and selecting undo, which will just undo the last command that you did, which in this case I just deleted something. So if I do Command Z, it undoes that last step that I just did. So Command Z, I don't care what application you're in. Basically every app on the Mac, if you mess up, if you do something you didn't mean to do, in most cases you can use Command Z to undo that last action. And that is such a useful shortcut, especially if you're an editor. The whole point of editing is to try things out. You are making changes. It's very, very common that you're going to make a change that you did not mean to make. Especially in Final Cut, it's very easy to accidentally click the wrong thing, or if you are using these shortcuts, you might hit the wrong button on accident. That's okay. Hit Command Z. You can undo that last action and get you back. Now, the other thing I want to point out about Command Z is you can just hold down the Command key and just, while you're holding Command, continuously press the Z key. Each time you press Z, it's going to undo that step that you did. So you can undo a whole bunch of steps. I have not found a maximum number inside of Final Cut Pro 10. I know in older versions of Final Cut there was a limit and you had to set that, but as far as 10 is concerned, it seems like it'll just keep on going back until you open Final Cut. Now, the thing I want to warn about that is you don't want to trust that the undo action is always going to be there. Because if you do Command Z multiple times and you just assume it's going to be there, well, if something goes wrong, let's say Final Cut unexpectedly quits, you have a power outage, if something doesn't go the way you thought it was going to be, even if you just quit Final Cut forgetting that you have those there, you're going to lose that undo history. So don't 100% rely on Command Z all the time is my tip around that shortcut. If you're you're actually trying something out and you know you're probably going to just Command Z it and undo it, what I recommend in those cases is with your project selected here, you can go up to the edit menu and there's an option to duplicate that project as a snapshot. The shortcut is Shift Command D for duplicate. And that will make a copy of the current project, which in this case is my Q&A, makes a duplicate of that project with the date and time that I duplicated it, but it doesn't actually open up that snapshot. It doesn't go to that duplicated version. That lets you continue to work on your project, and then if you need to return to how it was set at that moment in time, you can then do that. That snapshot is there for you. So very cool feature that's built into Final Cut. Command Z is great, but make sure you're using it correctly. Don't rely on it to go back on everything. Don't hesitate. Go up and use Shift Command D, duplicate your projects as a snapshot, then you can return to those as you need them. So those were the shortcuts that finished 4th and 3rd. They made it into the Final Cut 4, but they did not make it on to the final round. So what 2 shortcuts did make it in the final round? Well, if you watch the opener, you know it's Command B for blade, and that shortcut is very useful. It's slightly different than the B key, and I'm going to show you why. I'm going to demo that here. But that shortcut, as far as shortcut of the year goes, is going up against something that some may say is not a shortcut, which I do, but it's still a keyboard key, so it's in there, and it's the space bar. It's very hard to watch a movie if you can't play back your project, right? So the space bar also made it in. So let's take a look at both of these shortcuts. I'm going to start with space bar because that one's pretty straightforward. When you're in your project, you can hit the space bar, and it'll start playing back your project, right? Now, you might be thinking that that's all there is to the space bar, but there's a couple things about Final Cut Pro 10 that really maximize the way that you play back your content. The most important is this ability to have skimming. If skimming is disabled, which is this little icon on the toolbar, if you disable skimming, hitting the spacebar is playing back always from where the playhead is located. And if you don't know, the playhead is this kind of orange red line here that's moving across, that's showing us what's in the viewer there, right? So spacebar to play, spacebar to pause. And It's great. It's a great shortcut, but with skimming, it actually really helps you out in getting through your content quickly. So I'm going to enable skimming, which if you follow the bracket, you know is S is the shortcut for skimming. And with skimming enabled, you can just drag across. I'm not clicking the mouse or anything. I'm just dragging across the timeline here. And I'm able to see almost instantly in the viewer a preview of the clip that's under the skimmer. So the skimmer is here on the kind of where the orange line is, even though the playhead is staying at the moment where it stopped before on this little video of the cat, right? Now, if I hit the space bar at any time when I hit it, if the skimmer is active, the playback is going to happen from the skimmer location. So that's the difference. If skimming is not enabled, you're always playing from the playhead location. If the skimmer is active, which right now it is down on the timeline, when I hit the space bar, it plays back from that moment. Now, if I go up into the viewer here, or the inspector, and I were to hit the space bar, the playback, there's no skimmer down there, so it's going to play back from the playhead position. And let's pause again. It's very similar if you're in the browser looking at some of your clips. When you hit the space bar, it plays back from that moment in time. And then space bar again, pauses it. Right? Pretty straightforward with the space bar there. Now, the other shortcut that made it up here into the final round is Command B for blade. And a little bit different. If you do Command B at any location on your timeline, it'll blade or cut at that location. And in a similar fashion, it's going to do it at the playhead location or the skimmer location, whichever is active. And Command B, it makes a cut right there. And if I wanted to, I could use Command Z to undo those couple steps if I didn't want to blade at that location. So Command B is very helpful. If you're using the razor blade and you thought that the B shortcut should be up here, Command B, I agree, is going to be a little bit more useful because you can just go through and with your left hand be on Command B, your right hand can be moving along on the skimmer, and you can just do Command B, everywhere that you want to make a cut. And you could be on hundreds of clips going through and doing this, and then you didn't even switch tools. You're still on the select tool, so you can then select an area, hit the delete key if you want to delete a bunch of these, or hold Command, and we can select a bunch of areas, hit delete to remove those all at once. So Command B for cutting at the playhead or skimmer location is a pretty useful shortcut, and you can't watch your stuff if you can't play it back, so the space bar is a big one up there. So with all of this kind of brings us to the end here. We want to announce which shortcut is going to win it. The votes, let me take a look here, are still, the poll is still open there, so you can still get the last couple votes in. It's going to close up in just a minute or two here, and then we'll get the shortcut announced for you. But yeah, these shortcuts, the ones that made it up here, I think the voting went really well and definitely brought up some pretty cool shortcuts up to the top. Let me bring over the bracket. And if you are on anawesomeguide.com, you can go over and get this link to see the shortcuts and how they went. But again, just to summarize overall, we had the different categories for shortcuts. So if I zoom out here, let's go 50%. Couple categories here on the left side. We had editing and organizing based shortcuts. We had Windows based shortcuts, marking, tools. And then on the right side, we have playback and navigation, effects, general, application, and view. So all very useful categories of shortcuts. And these were the top 64 that made it in. You probably can't read them right now, which is fine. But if you go on to anawesomeguide.com, I'll put the link up a little bit later. You can get this bracket and see those top shortcuts. And if you don't know what the shortcuts do when you read them off of this list, it's probably a good idea to start learning them. There's a reason these shortcuts got voted onto the bracket here, and especially if they made it onto round 2 or round 3, there was hundreds of votes for these shortcuts. So these are the ones you want to know. If you're new to editing, or even if you're an experienced editor switching over to Final Cut 10 or a different app, like these are the ones you want to start learning. That's why the spreadsheet's out there. I'm going to create another document too after this just to make it a little bit more clear what all of those shortcuts do. And then we'll be able to get that up. So looking at the Instagram stories, they're starting to drop off. So we have about a minute left of voting. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the votes right now that we see. And yeah, there's almost no hope for spacebar. So it looks like Command B to cut something at the playhead location is going to be the 2019 shortcut of the year for this year. And this is the first year we're doing it, so it is the first shortcut of the year. We definitely going to plan to do this again next year because it is a great way to look at the shortcuts and find them and understand what they are. So if you are not using Command B in your editing, in your just standard workflow for editing, if you're cutting things and trimming things a different way, you might want to think about switching over and using Command B as your way to cut clips on the timeline as opposed to using the blade tool, the trim tool, or something else. All those tools are great. There's a reason they're in Final Cut, but Command B has been voted the 2019 shortcut of the year. It is definitely a great shortcut. So I'm glad that one made it on there. The runner-up then is going to be Spacebar. And again, finishing third, we have Command Z. And then just the letter B gets number 4, fourth place, because it is going to be used there for activating the razor blade tool, which is another great tool to use there. So that is what I have for you for the 2019 shortcut of the year. Go ahead and subscribe on here. You'll get little notifications. You can hit the little bell on there if you want a notification for when additional videos are posted. Try to post multiple tutorials and other things up there. And if you have a question, you can always leave a comment on one of the videos, or you can send an email to finalcutprohelp@me.com. Also here on anawesomeguide.com, there's a form on there you can fill out. There's a full Final Cut course if you want to learn it inside and out on there as well. And like always, on the social medias, you can use @FinalCutProHelp to reach out and follow us. Our main pages are going to be on Instagram. That's where all the voting for these shortcuts are, and daily tips are posted there. But you can also find us obviously here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all of those locations there. So I hope you had a wonderful time following along as we looked for the 2019 shortcut of the year and went through that wild bracket. You can see the summary of everything throughout the videos on anawesomeguide.com. And you can also view the past videos on here if you want to see those other shortcuts and how they're used and what they're for. Don't hesitate to look at those other videos. And again, if you disagree with the shortcut of the year that made it up here, I want to know why. Put that in the chat down below. And if you found a shortcut that you're using that did not even make it onto the bracket this year, definitely send those out to me as well, because I want to see what shortcuts you're using the most and how you're utilizing Final Cut. It's always cool to see your workflows. Well, that is what I have for you. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of your evening if you're in an area where it's later at night, or enjoy the rest of your day.